Hi, all freeze cracked here. Hey, it's raining, and I haven't made a video in a while. I had some disorganized thoughts. So I'm going to do a disorganized video talking about stuff. Okay, this is where I'm starting. For those of you that have seen my stuff, my other videos, you may know that this is a piece of heat-treated Kinley rock from West Texas that I got from Kinley. Well, I was at a nap-in recently, and Kinley was there, and he had a bunch of his rock. And I was talking to somebody, and they said, well, they had trouble dealing with some of the shapes of the stuff there. And there were people there selling Pedernales amoebas, which are really odd shaped, and big stuff. And I like the way Kinley rock is blanked. And so I thought I'd talk about that. But in doing so, I thought I'd show you some other stuff. This is an actual artifact from Gillespie County, Texas. And if you'll notice, it's blanked quite a bit, like some of the Kinley rock is blanked, although this bottom part didn't work at all. What I think this is a blade core. I think the old boy was trying to get some blades off of it because it's a little atypical compared to the other stuff that I found. But clearly, working flattened and squared off shapes is not something to be afraid of or not to avoid. Here's another one. This is from Central Texas. This is from a different area. And it's kind of blanked in a similar fashion. And I think that what they're doing sometimes is they're using the planes and the flat surfaces to get tool flakes off of. And in these cases, instead of intending to make a biface, they're actually using this as a core, and the goal is the tools themselves. And I made a video recently that showed a lot of flake tools. So I am jumping around, but I wanted to show you something. There's a flake tool. These are paleo. There's another flake tool, and I guess here's the left-handed version. I thought these tools were very interesting because it's almost like we don't have thousands of flake tools, but it's interesting if you look at how you've got the bevel down, you've got like graver type stuff up at the top, but you got the bevel down and then a bevel and then a blade, and the same on that and the same on that. It almost looks like tanto knives kind of in the way that they were done. And the fact that we found 3 like that recently to me doesn't seem coincidental. I find them interesting. So anyway, sometimes the tool itself is the goal, and we have numerous examples of that. And you can definitely, skin a deer with a flick. But while I was showing you this, I want to show you how things are set up on some of the old work. Look at this. Don't think for a minute that that shape is accidental. I'll show you a classic proof. This is another artifact from Central Texas. Look at this. Does that look accidental to you? No. And you're like, well, what are they doing? Why are they doing this? Well, there could be times when they were wanting a flake for something, but the strategy here is kind of what I've been trying to get some people to think in terms of. Too often you have people making bifaces in which I've got a biface here. Now this is one I worked on. Okay, this is something I've worked on. You can see the same effect, but not as strongly. This is all tapered and everything. This is a later stage biface. But you can see you've got the zigzag or the sinuous type edges. And in this case, this edge is more or less turned towards this side, and it's more or less ready to abrade a lot and be a continuous platform. And I've got thickness here that I can remove by doing that. This other side had already been turned down to this side, and you see all these removals, and they have already occurred. So now it needs to be knocked down and beveled to raise it a little bit to try and shoot some to this side. But as you're doing all that, you end up with it getting tapered. So what I see sometimes is I see people that have a biface. This was hammerstone, by the way. They have a biface and it'll have tapered down edges brought to the center line and regularized. Can't do anything with it like that very well for further thinning. So what I have said is get your edges where they are structured so as to be useful for thinning the middle of the piece. And hopefully you can see how doing things in this manner could do that. You start out with something blocky, and all you have to do, you get something blocky like this, or you can get you a tilly rock or something that has an edge like this, and you say, well, that's a problem. No, it really isn't. All you have to do is start picking you a couple of places around it that are not going to be in your finished point. So like if your finished point is going to be an agate basin right in through here, well, you don't need this, you don't need this, you don't need that, etc. What you do then is just tilt it down a little bit. You can put a thin, if you want to protect your finger or worry about your finger, take a thin piece of leather, put it on your finger, tilt it down a little bit. But anyway it goes, you can kind of hold out under the edge, tilt it down a little bit, and then hit straight down on that edge with a hammerstone or bopper. Straight down. What you'll end up with is about a 45-degree bevel. And you can do that a couple of places if you want. Once you do that, you just zigzag all around them because you've created your platform. So, say for instance, on this rock, you tilted it down, you hit down, you got this bevel. Well, then you just flip around and you can hit it here and get that flake. And then flip it over and hit it here and get that flake, and then flip it over and hit it there and get that one, and then there and then that one. And then what you're ended up with is this shape is great for further reduction. Why? Well, you end up with platforms turned towards both faces that are strong and thick and at a great angle for you to abrade heavily and then drive in hard on them and do major removals. Like on this flake right here, on this platform right here, I could come in and I could blast a flake all the way across there and get rid of, and it would be about that thick. I could get rid of huge thickness with that platform. Or this one. That one has a little bit of stuff in the way, but that's a good platform. This is a great platform to shoot through there. So basically when you create this sort of a shape, this is ready to go, you know, for further reduction. Another way that you can do stuff, someone gave me this, friend of mine. This is a biface from Tennessee, and it's for paint material. I want you to notice something though. You see how it's tapered a lot over here and there's a bunch of thickness here? Okay, now watch, I'm going to flip it. Same thing, tapered over here and a bunch of thickness here. This thing has been set up in kind of a trapezoidal pattern. Can you see it? It's set up in a trapezoidal pattern that's ready for major thickness removal. And so, well, how can you do that? Well, it's real simple. You can knock down a little bit more, braid this, and you can do support out underneath and hit hard on there, and you can drive major thickness off of here. And then flip it, and you can do the same thing here. Or if you want to, you can try and use these ridges and drive from one, knock down there and drive all along that ridge and do a major removal there. Or knock down there and do a major removal there. Take you a flake kind of like this maybe. This is a Texas flake, but hammerstone. So there's different strategies. You can use strategies that operate off continuous type platforms. You can use strategies that operate off this serrated zigzag toothed kind of thing. Here's another one. But notice I haven't said create a bunch of convexity and use it. I don't use convexity a whole lot. This is a Central Texas biface that does have a fair amount of convexity, but in this case, I don't think that they were going for as great a convexity, and it looks like they were having a little bit of problems with it because I'm seeing more stepping on this. And when they're having more stepping, they might address that. This person may have had less experience. They might address it through shortening their flakes and going at steeper angles to reduce that. But the one thing I would tell you about it is I'd rather have a thicker piece than one that's too thin, because if it's kept wide and you try and reach the middle with thinness, it's hard to do, and it's easier to just bevel a little bit and work off thickness and take big thick flakes as you're going into the middle. Okay, I'll show you a couple of other things that are interesting. Sometimes the reduction strategy is not to make bifaces. What you see here is, this was on an amoeba. There was a big hit taken here and a flake taken off, and then this was hit right there and a flake taken off. And what you ended up with is a nice duck-billed scraper type tool, where you refine your edges over here and then use it just like it is as a tool. It's strong, it's clean. You can build gravers on it. You can just do different things with it. I showed you some little flake tools before. Here's a ginormous flake tool. Someone took this flake, and then all they basically did was knock off any bulb remnants of it and then start refining the edge for a knife or scrapers or whatever. Kind of cool. Now, you can tell these things are from Central Texas, where there was areas that they had plenty of rock, plenty of large rock. Here's an overshot flake, hammerstone overshot. But look at these flakes. That's a big flake. Here's another giant flake. So the strategies vary dramatically based on where people were too, and what kind of stuff they had to work with. Okay, let's see. I don't think I showed you this one yet. Here's another one where you can see that the removals still are those zigzag tooth kind of removals that allow you to do more. Now, I really kind of personally feel like that the purpose of this one was to just get the flakes to use for something, but they did set it up to where if they wanted to, they could do further reduction easily. Oh, I'll just show you this one because it's pretty. I like this flake. Material was cool. And then I'll show you this one because it looks like it's a chalcedony, and I have not found much like this anywhere in Texas. But it looks like that was a pretty good chalcedony to work. It's almost like a quartzite. What else? I told you this was going to be disorganized, right? You can always tell when a flake is old because once it gets that hydration around cortex back on it where it was flaked, that was done a long time ago, at least around here, or not around here, but over in Central Texas. Okay, so then my interpretation of things, or how I do stuff, this was a demo at a nap-in recently, and this is direct percussion. It's copper direct with a large bopper. What I did was, this was a tabular piece of Petronellus material, and I did just like I told you. A guy was having problems with breaking stuff and was talking about convexity. I'm like, well, I don't use convexity very much, and I grabbed the tab and I just did those hits straight downward like I told you, zigzagged it real fast, set up a continuous platform, turned it slightly to this edge, and then took about 7 hits across it with supported direct percussion. I just put my finger underneath them and hit them, and hitting in hard, because I was trying to show, hit hard. I was hitting really hard at a flat angle and supporting it with my finger here so it couldn't hinge down, and drove these flakes. All the flakes came over this far. And so then you can see how high this was relative to that. And so you can see how much that did. So then all I would have to do is turn this downward a little bit, abrade it, come back around and hit there and just blend everything into that. And I will have, with one series of flakes, have flattened that side dramatically. Probably took a 1/4 inch or more off of it. And then once that would be done, then this would be set up to do the same thing, hitting to this side, and then take it off from the other side. And that's kind of how I approach it. I'll get these deltas off, turn the thing up, and then go that way. But not building a lot of convexity, just trying to thin the middle and come on into the middle. Here's a similar kind of concept, but this is a more advanced later stage thing, but still not with a lot of blenders or anything. This is indirect scars that you see on this. This is Georgetown material, and so the last set was here, and you can see it's flat, it's past center line. So the other concept would be shoot back and blend into that, and you just keep lowering it a little bit. Each level a little bit, tiny bit lower than the next. And at some point when it gets real thin and flat, this other side hasn't had that much done yet, so it needs to be turned up and come on the other side some. At some point when it gets thin and flat, you have to start being really careful, and you start isolating your platforms and setting things out more carefully to avoid breaking it, but also to avoid hinging it badly anymore if you're getting it so thin that you're not sure you're going to be able to deal with that from the other side. But anyway, so that's indirect, and it's even more patterned and easily controlled. Okay, now along my lines of not being organized with this, I wanted to mention, people keep talking about breaking stuff, snapping stuff, snapping stuff, and how to flute things. And fluting is hard. Fluting breaks stuff. No, it really isn't. What I've started telling people is practice your fluting type flakes on the sides of your regular work, since you do hundreds and hundreds of flakes in your regular work. Practice shooting stuff flat in and driving it and hinging it on the sides, because it's the same concept. It's just the support is more critical on the ends because of the phenomenon of end snap. But what is happening usually, let me show you something. I hate to draw you pictures, but sometimes drawing a picture is the easiest thing. When you've got your platform set up, you set your platform hopefully below the center line, halfway between the imaginary center line and the face. You set your platform up here, and say you've got your platform right there. Well, in order to drive that flake straight in and hinge it, there's a certain angle that you have to have based on what happens with conchoidal fracture, if you'll recall. So the problem is that angle is a downward angle to get the angle coming off of it with a conchoidal fracture that drives straight in. And so therefore, if this is long and it isn't supported correctly, and you do this, it end snaps the piece. What happens is, if you will, you got a piece like this, you're hitting downward, and when you do, see how that front end flips, it won't take it. The mass, it starts up a harmonic vibration type thing, and it just fall in half the middle, and you're like, what happened? You end up with two pieces hanging in your hand. Well, it's pretty easy to stop that. The first thing is, you do have to have the right angle to make that thing run straight in, to hinge like you want it, or feather a little bit less straight in, tiny bit, a degree or two, and feather out if that's what you want. But then you need to support under here so that the downward force, none of that downward force translates into a bending force or the harmonic vibration on this piece. So there's two ways to do that. When I'm working on the side of things like this, or even when I'm working on the end, a lot of times you'll see me just pinching it like this. I'll just be pinching it and holding that edge together. And when I hit it, the flake easily goes anyway and runs that way, but because of support, it doesn't hinge down. So the downward force is stopped by my support there. When I'm fluting with indirect, what you'll see me do a lot of time is I will take a piece of leather and I will fold it a little bit. You can use one layer, but sometimes I fold it because it's real thin and use two. And I'll stretch it across the face that I'm fluting, and I'll grab it just like that. My fingernail's yellow because I peeled a tangerine earlier. It's not because I'm a smoker, because I don't. So I'll just hold it like that, and that's the only place I hold it. And then I jam the end into the side of my leg and put my thing on there, make sure, and I lift up a tiny bit to get the angle just right, put the punch on there, and then hit it. And I make sure I get the angle right to drive it straight in, but then this kind of acts like my finger would. It kind of traps the flake. It doesn't put pressure on it, so it doesn't make it dive, but it traps it so it doesn't hinge down and doesn't make that. But you want to make sure you get a good isolation on there, and you also don't want to make sure you don't overstrike. Overstriking is when you I've taught you this before in other videos, but I rest my elbow area on my other leg when I'm swinging, and so my arm can't get longer when I'm swinging. I push against stuff, and then when I swing, it just barely catches it. And it's critical how much you get on that thing, because too little and you're going to get a real thin flake that does nothing, but too much and you're going to hit up on top and you're going to put huge bending force on it that your support can't counteract, and you'll still break it. You'll still overstrike. So, with a punch, the punch needs to be, it's like shooting pool. The punch needs to be at the right angle on the thing, and get enough bite to get the flake, but not too much bite, or you're going to have two pieces. But I think the problem with most people's fluting efforts is that if they've put an hour or so into a preform, they don't want to ruin it, and they don't make huge, vast quantities of preforms, so they don't get enough practice fluting to just completely master it. That's why I say we'll practice on the sides, because you can set up isolated platforms and shoot them on the side. You can shoot, dozens, if not hundreds, of quote-unquote side flutes on a piece when you're practicing, and you'll be making stuff in the process. And you'll also be practicing from the other side, removing hinges. So, I mean, it's just an all good, no loss kind of concept. I just really feel like a lot of people should be able, especially with indirect, to master the angles enough to where they have, on clovises, it shouldn't have more than max 10% or so breakage. I mean, I almost never break a clovis. And I'm not running flutes to the midline or anything. I mean, most of my flutes are maybe a third or something, but it's just like, it's almost like I have zero concern when I go to flute a clovis on the end with indirect now with a punch that there's going to be a problem, because usually the only thing that happens is I won't get the flute I want, but I never break the pieces. I mean, it's almost unheard of. Now, if you do shoot that thing straight in for a hard hinge, and you set the platform high, you're probably going to break it, because with the higher you set the platform, the less you can shoot it straight in. If the platform's in the middle, straight in would be cutting the piece in half, and you can't do that. It's going to break. And if it's almost up at the middle, when you shoot a real thick flake in and it hinges out really hard, when it stops and all that force, see, when it stops and hinges, the force that the flake was running with becomes force transferred into the whole piece, and it kicks the snot out of the piece. So when it does that, it can kick it so hard that in itself can, if you're way up in there and there's not a lot of meat left on it, especially if it had started to roll a little bit reverse on you, it'll probably break. But for the most part, I feel bad that people are always worried about, oh, gee, they break a bunch of stuff with fluting, because you shouldn't have large amounts of breakage. Okay, Well, you know, that's about all that I've got for now because this is like a 24-minute video, and that's longer than it needed to be. I may put, let me show you a point I made the other day. I think this is one. Yeah, this is one. This is a, just for grins, I'm just showing you that was a nap-in deal that I made in Johnson City. Then I'll show you another point. I don't have any good points here that I made, but somebody gave me this piece of knife river, and it was a small one, and I just made a little toady type thing out of it. So I'll stop for now. Bye for now, freeze crack.